What's up, Nerdyverse? I'm Daddy Louie, and in this video, we're going to be comparing Citadel's new contrast paints with Army Painter's old washes. So stick around. Alright guys, so prior to making this video, I had actually never really used Army Painter shades before, and I had never obviously tried the Citadel Contrast Paints either, since they're fairly new, and I got my hands on them a little later than some other people did. So what I kind of wanted to do was take three models that were all similar in size and detail, and paint each of them in different ways. I wanted to paint one the old school way that I would normally paint, you know, with priming, base coat, shade, layers, you know, and that's it. And then I wanted to take another model and I wanted to do it the new Citadel contrast way. So I wanted to base coat it with one of their new base coats, and then paint the other rest of the details with these new contrast paints. And then the third model I wanted to do similar, where I base coated the model in an Army Painter primer and then did the entire thing with Army Painter washes. So that's what I've done. We're going to take a look at the different results. So if you'll join me on the table, we'll get started. So the models we're going to be using today are actually Relicblade models from Metal King Studios. They are amazing models. It's an amazing game. If you have not seen my Relicblade video, I will throw up a card on screen so you can go ahead and check that out. And subscribe as well, because I'm going to have more Relicblade videos coming out really soon. My inspiration behind this video was when the contrast paints first started to come out. Their internet was really flooded with videos, and what Army Painter did was they actually put out a video shortly after showing the same similar technique that you would use with a contrast paint, only using just their shades. And I kind of wanted to see, you know, what that was all about and test it out to see if it really worked, and that's kind of what we're looking at today. I'll throw a link to that video in the description so you guys can check it out. So once I had a color scheme picked out, I went ahead and did my way of painting first. I used this model here, and I started with a Citadel's Corax White primer spray. And then for the bone, I just shaded the entire model with Agrax Earthshade, and then went back over the bone with Ushabti Bone and brought back some of the details. The cloak, or the rags, I used a German Gray by Vallejo. And then I just used some gray blues from the Citadel range to bring the details out. And then for the green bones, I just used a mix of different greens that I had lying around. And total time, the model took me next to no time at all to paint, simply because Citadel washes dry pretty quickly, and everything else was pretty easy and straightforward to paint. The next model that I painted was with the contrast paints. So I primed the entire model with the Citadel Color Wraith Bone, and then I went over all of the bone first with Skeleton Horde. It's this right here. And I let that dry, and then once it was dry, I went back and used the Wraith Bone paint to bring the rags back and these bones back. And the rag, I used Black Templar, and then the green bones, I used Orc Flesh. So I let those dry, and then once they were dry, I went back over everything just to bring it out a little bit with some details. I used some of those gray blues again on the cloth, and the greens to bring out the bones, and Ushabti bone to bring out the other bones. Total time, this model didn't take me too long. The biggest issue that I had with time-wise as far as this model went was just the contrast paints took a lot longer to dry than I thought that they would, and I had to wait for everything to dry in between coats. So aside from that, the amount of time that this model took me versus the other model were about the same if you take out dry times. So this is the last model that I did, and I used all Army Painter paints for this one up until the highlight step. So I base coated or primed the model in Army Painter's flat white, and then for the bones I used soft tone, which is one of their Quickshades, and I let that dry, and then I went back over the bone with Ushabti bone to highlight things back up. For the cloak, I actually did a 1 part blue tone to 1 part strong tone, just to make it like a dark gray. And it actually worked a little better than I was anticipating that it would. And then for the green bone pieces, I just used green tone. Again, I let everything dry, and then I went back through and highlighted everything. So excluding dry time, again, this model took exactly the same amount of time as the other two models. With dry time, this model was faster than the contrast paints because the shades dried quicker than the contrast paints did. However, the washes from Army Painter didn't really add a lot of color to the details of the model because it is a wash. So it went into the recesses, and I really had to work harder during the highlight step to bring some of those details back. But all in all, I think it turned out pretty well. So after testing all of that out later on, I actually went back and did another model in contrast paints just because I was curious about the whole dry time thing. So I painted up this guy also from Relicblade here, and this is almost done entirely in contrast paints. I did all of the bone with Skeleton Horde. I did all of the cloth in Black Templar, and the red here I did Black Templar first, and then Blood Angels red after, to make it a darker red. And of course there is some highlighting and stuff that I put into it afterwards. Oh, and I also did the snake bite leather on the backpack as well. So this model actually turned out better than I anticipated as well, and I was really happy with the end results. So once I was done with this little experiment, I took a bunch of photos and I posted them to a group of my friends who are also miniature painters, and they could not tell the difference between the model that I had painted with contrast paints, with shades, or the standard paints and brush. So I think that the bottom line here is that obviously this was just a small sampling, and in hindsight I probably shouldn't have used skeletons who only have a few details to paint, because I didn't get to really sample a whole lot of colors from any of the lines that I used. But I think that in my opinion, the contrast paints and the Army Painter shades have a purpose in your arsenal of tools. So I think that it's definitely worth getting. I don't think that you need every single contrast color. I think that you can combine colors together, lay one color down and then another color on top of it to give you other colors. There's some colors that I would avoid completely. In this case, I would completely avoid Skeleton Horde if you already have Agrax Earthshade, because I feel like to do bone, just putting a white base coat down and then Agrax Earthshade on top of it, you get a better color than you would from the Skeleton Horde contrast paint. As far as the Army Painter washes, kind of the same thing. I would only take colors that you need that you don't have of something else. I don't think there's a need to have blue contrast paints and a blue ink from Army Painter as well. If you already have the blue Army Painter, I don't think you need the contrast paint, and vice versa. My only major complaint with the contrast paints would probably be dry time. So if you are only going to paint 1 or 2 models at a time like I do, I don't do big assembly lines of models. I usually just do 1 or 2 at a time. Then contrast paints are difficult because the dry time is kind of long. So, you know, you throw some contrast paint on and then you need to put the model down and go do something else while it dries before you can come back. Now, if you're going to do a big army all at one time, the contrast paints are great because you can throw some contrast paint on one, put it down, grab the next model, do it again over and over and over again. So if that's your thing, then I definitely recommend looking into the contrast paints as well. One quick final note about Citadel's new contrast paints is their Wraithbone spray. This spray is awesome. I highly recommend it for any type of painting that you're going to do. It's kind of like an eggshell white. You throw it down on the model, it's super smooth. You don't necessarily need to use contrast paints with it. I will be using this stuff for a very, very long time. It is expensive, $20 a can, but I think it's totally worth it. All right, well, that was just a quick look at the differences that I found between the new Citadel contrast paints and Army Painter's shades and washes. If you liked this video and you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps us out a lot. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. I have lots more videos coming out about painting, about Relicblade, about tons of other types of games, so definitely stay tuned for those. If you have any suggestions of any future videos you would like to see, or if you have any videos you would like featured on our channel, leave a comment in the comment section down below or get in touch with us on one of our social media platforms. We would love to hear from you. That's all from me. See you guys in the next video.